Welcome to Moor House. We are a specialist school and college for children and young people with language disorder. My name is Marr and I'm a specialist teacher for students with speech, language and communication needs. Part 1 of my course aims to raise the profile of developmental language disorder and explore the difficulties a student with DLD might experience. The following video introduces you to life at Moor House School and College. Please pause this presentation and type the following link into your web browser to access our website. Then click on the Play Our Video button to watch. Alternatively, you can access it by clicking on link number 1 in the document that accompanies this course. Developmental language disorder is more common than autism, but so few people have heard of it. Let's see how much you know. Please grab a pen and paper and answer the questions on this quiz with true or false. Just pause the presentation and press play when you are ready to move on. Answers will be given at the end of this course. Here are questions 6 to 10. Just pause the presentation and press play when you are ready to move on. So, what is developmental language disorder? Developmental language disorder, or DLD, is when a child or adult has difficulties talking and/or understanding language. These difficulties impact on education and social interactions and often mental health. The difficulties exist without another biomedical condition such as autism or intellectual disability. So how do we identify a child or young person with DLD? There are some key signs to look out for. You might notice that a student has difficulties with understanding word meaning. Students are often very confused by words that sound the same but have a different meaning. Look at the pictures below. They are very different. But how does a child know when we say greenhouse whether we are describing a house that is green or the greenhouse that we would find in our garden? Children and young people with DLD may find it difficult to follow instructions, especially if they are long or contain complex vocabulary. They may struggle to understand and answer questions who, what, when, where, and the more complex forms why and how. They will certainly experience difficulty with vocabulary, remembering words, recalling words, understanding them, and using them in the correct context. They might struggle to construct sentences accurately, both spoken and written, ensuring that the grammar is correct and the meaning is clear. They will certainly find difficulties with understanding and generating narratives of all types. Children and young people with DLD often have problems with sequencing. Using language in social situations can be a minefield for children with DLD. Understanding the unwritten rules of conversation can be extremely challenging. Understanding non-literal language, idioms and inferencing will also be an area that children with DLD will struggle with. You may also hear a child struggling with word finding. It's like that thing you write with and it's got that lead pointy thing in. They will find understanding concepts really challenging at times, especially maths and science words that relate to time, size, comparison and measures. If you think a child in your class might have DLD, it's useful to listen out for errors in their expressive language and make a note of them. You might notice that a student speaks in shorter sentences or uses less sophisticated vocabulary than the other classmates. They may make subtle speech errors. They may experience word-finding difficulties and appear to stumble and restart sentences. Here is an example of that from Ella, who is 14 years old and was trying to describe what she had done in a DT lesson. We had to make her draw something and draw it in a don't know how to say it properly, like something like a copper, but it's called, and it's aluminium, and then we draw it with the pencil, and then we get a punch and a hammer, then start digging it in that outline. Recently I heard a young adult with DLD say he was pruning himself in the mirror. Can you work out what he was actually trying to say? Recognising if a child or young person has receptive language difficulties is much more of a challenge for classroom practitioners. Here are a couple of examples of communication errors that might indicate a pupil has difficulties with their receptive language. An adult might ask, "New shoes? Who bought them for you?" Child responds, "They are red." An adult might give this instruction: "Before you finish your drawing, put your book away." The child carries on drawing. Pupils may answer questions or make comments that are off topic, inaccurate, or seemingly random. They may be quiet in conversations or discussions, or could be overly talkative to mask difficulties with their understanding. Pupils with DLD may often appear to have poor attention skills. They get told you weren't paying attention, when in fact they were paying attention, but could not understand the language that was being used. It is not always obvious when students are not understanding what has been said. Take a look at these two signs. How do you think a student with DLD would interpret them? The English language is full of ambiguity. Here are two examples of phrases that a child with poor receptive language skills would struggle to interpret. Katie made a basket during the game. I saw her duck. There are also numerous examples of language used in social media, on TV, radio, and in the newspapers that pupils with receptive language difficulties would find a challenge to understand. I was recently listening to a show and tell item on Zoe Ball's Radio 2 breakfast show. She was interviewing a 5-year-old who was about to play a tune on the violin. When they had finished chatting, Zoe said, "Off you go." I wonder what the same child with DLD would have done. There are also some amusing examples of ambiguous language in newspaper clips. Here are two of my favourites. Mom leaves kid outside a bar in the rain to drink beer. Students cook and serve grandparents. Children with DLD often have difficulties with both understanding and using different sentence structures. They might misunderstand questions. For example, "What do you put tea in?" They answer sugar. Or, "Who were you hit by?" They answer, "I didn't hit anyone." They may misinterpret instructions. They often struggle to follow the sequence of events and miss out key details. They may only use very short sentences. The lady was sad, she went home. They might omit or make errors with tense or pronouns. I didn't wrote that, them goes swimming, or yesterday I go to my friend's house. They often get in a muddle trying to form complex sentences or ask questions. For example, the girl is what likes chocolate is making a cake. And finally, they may frequently restart sentences or make false starts. So how many children have DLD? One study carried out in Surrey in 2016 by Courtney Norbury, Professor of Developmental Language and Communications Disorders, found that 7.5% of all children had DLD. In an average class of 30, that's 2 children who may have developmental language disorder. Do a quick calculation to estimate how many students in your school might have DLD. Divide the total number of students by 10 and then work out 3/4 of this number. How many students would that be? The impact of having DLD is significant. Developmental language disorder is a lifelong condition. Children don't just grow out of it. It impacts on their reading, learning, social interaction, behaviour, and mental health. DLD and reading. To become a proficient reader, students need good language skills. They need to understand vocabulary and grammar and know how they fit together. The student that is struggling to read may have developmental language disorder. It is always worth asking if it is the language that is affecting progress with reading skills. DLD impacts directly on learning. Students may find it difficult to follow instructions, engage in class discussion, answer questions, and participate in group work. All of the above activities require language skills, so a student with DLD will struggle with learning also. The student in your class who is struggling to keep up might have DLD. Having DLD impacts on the development of social skills. Students with developmental language disorder may struggle to keep up with the nuances of peer interactions and so often get left out. They find it difficult to develop and maintain friendships and can be vulnerable to isolation and bullying. Research shows that language deficiencies can often co-occur with social, emotional, and behavioural disorders. One study by Dr. Alexandra Hollow found that 81% of all students with social, emotional, and mental health needs had language needs too. Research by Dr. Maxine Winstanley, clinical lecturer at the University of Manchester, found that the prevalence of developmental language disorder in a group of young people who committed 1 or more previous offences was 80%. Of the 87 who were identified as having DLD, only 2 reported accessing speech and language services when in primary education. Often students who do not know they have DLD may think of themselves as stupid as they are unable to engage in meaningful learning and/or social interaction. This may then impact on their confidence, self-esteem, and mental health. The following video explores why language is important for mental health. Please click the link to watch. Please pause this presentation and type the following link into your web browser to access this video. Alternatively, you can access it by clicking on link 2 in the document that accompanies this presentation. Having identified the range of difficulties children and young people with DLD might have, what can you do now to support students with DLD? Take a closer look at students with reading, learning, or social difficulties. Just ask yourself, could it be language that's the problem? Chat to the student one-to-one. Make a note of their strengths and weaknesses, both in terms of their learning and their social development. Observe their responses to whole class instructions. Remember, students with DLD may be good at copying others' lead, and so their difficulties may not be obvious. You have to observe very closely. And keep a record of your observations. What can you do in class? Consider the structure of your lessons. Take time to orientate the students at the beginning of the lesson. Use visuals to support when you're giving instructions, introducing key concepts, ideas and vocabulary. Include multiple opportunities for repetition and overexposure to key concepts, vocabularies and ideas, especially when new. Include phonological properties in words when teaching, and use signing and gesture where possible. Adapt your language level to the needs of the listener. Slow down the delivery of your lessons. It makes a huge difference to children and young people who have developmental language disorders. Processing time. Allow students extra time to process spoken instructions and to formulate both spoken and written responses. Make vocabulary a key part of each and every lesson. Part 2 of my course goes into greater detail about how we can support students with DLD in class. If you think a child in your class may have DLD, please take action. Talk to parents. Because there is low awareness of developmental language disorder amongst educators and the public in general, it is likely that many parents may not have heard of DLD either. Talk to your school special education lead, a specialist or your SENCO. Refer to specialist services such as speech and language therapy or speech and language pathology. The right support can make a difference. For the final part of this presentation, I'm going to hand over to the children and young people who live with developmental language disorder every day. Please watch Lily Farrington's amazing animation about developmental language disorder. Please pause this presentation and type the following link into your web browser to access the video. Or alternatively, you can access it by clicking link number 3 in the document that accompanies this presentation. The next slide that you will see is a poster that I was given when I first started working with students who had DLD over 20 years ago. It has always been on the wall in my classroom to remind me each and every day what it is like to live with language difficulties. It does say, what does speech and language disorder mean to me? And all my difficulties are hidden because nobody can see that I have speech and language impairment, but DLD can easily be inserted here. What does developmental language disorder mean to me? I can't remember the words that people say to me, so when I try to play football with the other children at school, I can't remember which way I should be kicking the ball. So I sometimes score own goals and the other boys get cross with me. My mum says I have difficulty relating to other people because I don't think about how they might feel. So I have problems keeping my friends. My mum still loves me. I can't speak at all, so I use an electronic voice box like Professor Stephen Hawkins. I know what I want to say, but I can't remember the right words when I need them. So at the post office I might ask for stickers instead of stamps. Because lots of people don't understand what I'm saying to them, I get frustrated and lose my temper, so people don't like being with me. My understanding of language is very literal, so when my biology teacher told me to strip the bark bare, I could only think of taking my clothes off or barking like a dog and playing with a teddy. It didn't make sense to me. My teacher got angry because he thought I was being awkward, so I panicked. I can't make my mouth into the right shape to make the words, so no one understands what I have to say. I can't get my words in the right order either, so they come out all jumbled up. Other people can't understand what I'm saying to them or what I'm writing. They think I'm stupid. I only really feel comfortable talking about the things that interest me, like engines, and I don't want to talk about anything else. It makes having a conversation with me hard. I can't remember the difference between up, down, back and front, so I don't always understand what the teacher is telling me. And all my difficulties are hidden because no one can see I have a developmental language disorder. As we get to the end of this presentation, there are 3 key messages that I'd like you to take away today. That developmental language disorder is when a child or adult has difficulties talking and/or understanding language. That developmental language disorder is hidden but affects approximately 2 children in every classroom, impacting on literacy, learning, friendships and emotional well-being. And finally, that support from professionals, including speech and language therapists and teachers, can make a real difference. I hope you found this course interesting and informative. If you'd like to learn more, please take a look at the websites below. There is also a link to the Moor House School and College website. You can access this by typing the address into your web browser, or alternatively, click the link on the document that accompanies this presentation. Here you will find information on the other courses we can provide. They include the Wheel of Independence, the Shape Coding System, bespoke training courses relating to speech, language and communication needs, and Makaton. And finally, the quiz answers. Question 1. With support and understanding, individuals with developmental language disorder can achieve social, academic and professional success. True. Question 2. People with developmental language disorder can have difficulties learning to read. True. Question 3. Developmental language disorder affects approximately 1 in 14 people. True. Question 4. People with developmental language disorders are not intelligent. False. Question 5. A bilingual speaker can have developmental language disorder in one language but not the other. False. Question 6. A child with developmental language disorder may also have difficulties with attention, fine and gross motor skills, speech and behaviour. True. Question 7. Adolescents with developmental language disorder don't benefit from speech and language therapy. False. Question 8. Only children from low socioeconomic backgrounds have developmental language disorder. False. Question 9. The cause of developmental language disorder is unknown, but can run in families. True. And finally, question 10. Developmental language disorder does not affect adults. False. The following references refer to the research mentioned in this presentation. I do hope that you've enjoyed this course. If you would like to find out more about how to support pupils with developmental language disorder in your classroom by identifying strategies and resources that can be used by teachers and teaching assistants, we can deliver a second session as part of your CPD or in-service training. Please see our contact details below. Thank you.